For those of you who don't know who I am or are wondering why you're watching this DVD, my name is Justin Bonello, and I've just spent the last couple of weeks finding out where my food actually comes from. And it might sound like a stupid statement to make, but we actually don't know where our food comes from. We have an image in our minds, you know, of cows in fields, beautiful vegetables growing, farmers wearing Wellingtons with the cow behind them and a vegetable patch behind their houses and happy families bubbling all over the lawn. But it's actually not true. Over the last 60, 70 years, the way that our food is produced has changed completely. And I didn't even know it. To feed the 7-odd billion people that are on the planet, we've had to change the way that we produce food. And only now we're beginning to realize that something is drastically wrong. So basically what I'm going to do is introduce you to the most important people on the planet, the women and men that put food on our tables, the farmers, the most endangered species in South Africa. My journey started off with Jean Grunewald on her farm, Krommerrivier in Grabouw. She is a free-range chicken farmer, and her story is quite an amazing one. You know, she started off farming a couple of chickens in her backyard, and now farms more than 75,000 of them a month. And what got her business going was her friend saying, "These chickens taste better than the ones that I buy." It's that simple. You know, I wasn't even thinking about what they eat and all the rest of it. It was out of Jean's quest to farm her own chickens for her family. It's strange to think that 100 years ago, every chicken we ate was organic. 50 years ago, it cost the same for a chicken as a leg of lamb. And then now, a chicken is the cheapest meat we virtually can give anyone. And that's because we figured out faster ways to make chickens grow, so that we can slaughter them more quickly, so that we can eat them more quickly. And it's very strange. The average chicken that we eat nowadays, you're talking between 35 and 42 days to slaughter from birth, which is quite hectic. And the question I have to ask myself, is it an ideal world? And I know I'm going to say no. I've eaten a chicken before that's taken 2 years to grow up. You know, it tastes different because it's been scrounging around in the earth, eating whatever it can find, developing its muscles. You can't expect the same thing out of an animal that's produced in 42 days. The other problem becomes, is that that's when you realize what a chicken should cost, because it should take 2 years for it to get up to a decent size where you can eat it. We've just figured out how to make it put on mass a lot quicker in optimum feeding conditions. So no, it's not an ideal world. But the amazing thing is that 10 years ago, there wasn't a free-range chicken on the market, virtually, you know? And nowadays there is, which means that you and I are demanding a better bird. An animal that's had a better life, that's better for us, is coming back into the marketplace. And that's amazing. At some point, you're going to turn into a Sunday roast. After Jean, we packed up and headed up into the Karoo to meet J.P. Smith, who's a farmer in the Aberdeen district of the Karoo. So he's a free-range sheep farmer. And it's weird to say free-range sheep because I thought all sheep were free-range, but they're not. On my first day with JP, we herded ewes and their lambs from the camp into central kraals, which was really quite cool. But then there's the day's trauma from spending a whole day out in the veld with all the dagwerkers, cutting off sheep's tails and inoculating them. And for a whole day you go completely insane. You know, it's all fun and games when you're herding them into one of the kraals to start docking tails and things, but when you're actually in that space with the ewes bleating for their lambs, it drives you insane. The whole day you just hear this meh, 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 and most of the time it's a mother looking for her lamb. And I mean, I had the worst nightmares I've ever had in my life that night. After being, and it wasn't the docking of the tails, you know, there's a part of me that says I eat lamb, and in order for that to happen, the tails are going to get docked and the animal is going to die at some point. You know, I can't be precious about that. Am I not going to eat lamb anymore? I'm going to eat lamb, you know. But I think by purely being here today with JP, I'm going to have a little bit more respect for what I eat. And the thing about going out into the Karoo is that you discover there's more of a story than just sheep. Much bigger story. JP is telling me about how when he was a young boy, there were 12 families that lived along the stretch of road that he lives on, and now there's only JP. The rest of the families have closed up, lost their farms. I mean, what happened?
Well, it just wasn't viable anymore to stay here.
Ek het gif in my gespuit. Moenie worry nie, ek gaan maar dood in die dorp. Ek kon nie anders nie.
Baie almal.
Baie almal. That about sums it up. Sure, JP. Small farms are no longer financially viable. It's that simple, you know. The piece of ground that kept a family going before no longer does it. You know, South Africa's farmers don't get any support. They take all these massive risks to put food on our table, and we really sometimes don't even pay enough respect to them. So after the Karoo, we headed up to the mountain kingdom of Lesotho to check out aquaculture. And listen, I don't need an excuse to go to Lesotho. The people are amazing. When you travel in Lesotho, you'll quickly understand, Dumela! You know, like a guy shouting across the valleys. So I didn't even need an excuse to go to the Katsi Dam, where Greg Stubbs has his aquaculture venture. And when I arrived, I didn't know too much about aquaculture. Didn't need to, you know. The most I knew about fish is the ones that I caught and sometimes put on the plate, but didn't understand why aquaculture is necessary and why are we farming fish. And then I met Greg Stubbs. You know, here's someone who wears his heart on his sleeve. If you just think about like the light bulb being invented or the telephone or whatever, there's someone that's had a moment where he said, I have an idea and I'm going to do it. And he's that type of guy. And the worst part of being an aquaculturist is the fingerlings travel from Cape Town, from Franschhoek, up to Lesotho, and it's a very emotional period for Greg, because if the fingerlings die en route between Cape Town and Lesotho, and there is a mortality rate, he's looking at all his hard work and everything disappearing in a couple of months down the line. So it's a very emotional period for him.
When you've been doing this for so long and you goes like that, I can relax now. You can see. You can see. Sorry, I can't.
Don't cry on me now, Greg.
I'm going to have a quiet moment.
He was so relieved, you know, and for me that put into perspective of being a farmer. You never know what's going to happen. You have very little control over the elements. The sections that you do have control over, you don't really have control over, and you could see that relief flooding out of it. The one problem with aquaculture is you've got to ask why we need it. And it's quite simple. There's simply not enough fish left in the sea.
By 2050, we'll be somewhere around 9 to 10 billion people. And they say that's the maximum carrying capacity, you can call it that, of the planet. It's scary. I mean, I won't be around anymore at that point. We're custodians of the planet for our kids, aren't we? I mean, that's what we ought to be doing.
The ocean's under massive pressure. It's that simple. Unless we figure out ways to reseed the ocean, I wonder often if they're going to recover at all. After checking out aquaculture, I want to know if the oceans could still support us. So after the mountain kingdom of Lesotho, we headed down to the Transkei, to the Wild Coast, to see if we could be modern strandlopers, beach walkers, to see if we could live off the coast. Hooked up with Patricia, who's a family friend, has been for many years, a couple of my crew, my wife, and we roughed it on the Transkei coast. In many respects, I kind of think of myself as a guy who you could put on a deserted island and I'd be okay, you know? I'd be able to kill something, catch something, eat something.
You know, yeah, I think if you get washed up on a desert island, you know, you want me with you. Well, if we carry on like this, the hungry ones may turn into the angry ones. You can't live on seafood alone. That much I can promise you. And I think the big realization of being in the Transkei was how much we've lost the connection with the earth. You know, our forefathers, they did what most of us aspire to every night. They sleep under the stars, fall asleep next to a fire, freedom, no office, no 9 to 5. Our lives are too taken up by really things that are not important. We come home in the dark, we eat ready-made TV dinners. You know, we consider the sort of 2 or 3 hours that we spend at home with our kids quality time. And when you're out in the outdoors, like we were in the Transkei, that's where you realize that's what we want, the great outdoors. So after the Wild Coast, we headed up to Cozy Bay, where we were going to be staying at the Tonga Beach Lodge. And going up there was kind of twofold. On the one hand, I wanted to see what a pristine marine environment looks like. And on the other hand, I wanted to check out a sustainable fishing method.
This square represents 100% of the ocean. And that little circle represents the 1% of the oceans that are marine reserves that are protected. The rest of this is open game. Where does our food actually come from? It comes from this 99%, our seafood. And why are we here? It's to show you what a pristine marine environment should look like.
One of my favorite quotes comes from Michael Palin, and he says, the only bug that you want to get when you travel is the travel bug. And in many respects, I think I have that quite badly. And in part, it's why I wanted to go up to the St. Lucia Wetlands Park. The other part was to check out the kraal fishing and to meet the local fishermen. I love meeting local tribes people, indigenous people in Africa. And the more remote the place is, the better for me. You know, I don't even care if you can't speak the same language. You know, you always want to go to places that are remote, where people have never been to before. It's quite sad, though, because there was a sense that that no longer exists in the Cozy Forest lake system with the local people. And it's become just a little bit commercialized. But when you travel to those places, you stand the risk of bringing your world into those places, you know, which is, I think, what's happened there. Here's a system that's operated for 700, 800 years, long before Europeans arrived on the African scene. And slowly but surely, the value system that's survived for so long there has been corrupted. And one of the most sustainable ways of fishing on the planet probably won't be here in another 100 years. If an Aboriginal tribe of Africa could figure out how to sustainably fish in the lake system, you know, why can't you use it as an example of what we could do in the seas if we just manage them properly? Because, you know, our oceans are under massive threat. And if we don't find ways to curtail the wholesale slaughter that's going on out there, at some point the only fish we are going to eat is going to be from aquaculture. So after Cozy Bay and the Tonga Beach Lodge and Forest Lodge and things, we headed up to the far north of South Africa, to Flip Nell's farm. And this was the continuation of my discovering the identity of the South African farmer, of where our food comes from. When you sit in a space with Flip Nell, you can't do anything but respect him. Every word that he says is measured, contemplated, thought about. And he's the kind of salt-of-the-earth farmer that you have in your mind. And when he talks, you listen. And you want to listen. You know, when I met Flip Nell, I met what I consider to be one of the bravest men on the planet. Often what we know is experience-based. And what Flip Nell did was he actually broke that cycle. At some stage in his past, he was told that fertilizers, pesticides are the way to go. That this is the miracle cure that farmers have been waiting for. And the promise of bigger yields, of less insect damage. You know, what farmer wouldn't want to make a couple of extra bucks?
We were adding more chemicals and using more chemicals to try to eliminate the diseases, but it was not working. We used more chemical fertilizer in order to boost the plants, but it was not working. We didn't get the results. But we kept on struggling for almost 10 years before we realized that the only solution will be to add organic material to the soil.
And what he did was he started mimicking nature's natural systems.
Organic material is only the food for all the different soil microorganisms. They, in their activities, they are loosening the soil and rectifying the structure and everything.
And the irony is, we're trying to mimic nature's systems. And it's way more sustainable and environmentally friendly. And one of the amazing things of being out on the farm is like meeting that sense of family again. On Flip's farm, he has both his sons working for him, his wife lives with him, both his daughters, his daughter-in-law and his daughter, work with his wife in the packing shed. And when they get together as a family, it's as a family. There's the kids, the wives, the daughters, sons. In cities, we don't have an inkling of what that's like. And we don't have that same support system either, which is what makes our lives so hard nowadays.